We get so many of these pitches saying we are the super app. And I always tell them, like, the first rule of super app is you never call yourself a super app, and you're not building a super app. You're building a product wedge from which you can expand into what might become a super app.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Lightspeed. Today, I'm joined by Matti and Fisk from Zee Prime Capital. When you think about a VC firm, you might think about like this office in Silicon Valley. I would say Matti and Fisk and Zee Prime are probably the opposite of that. And as we get through this conversation, you'll learn why. I've been drawn to Matti and Fisk really ever since you did an interview on Uncommon Core back in February 2021 with Suzu, RIP, and also Hasu. The episode was so good, they actually released 2 in a row, so 2 different ones. So guys, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, pumped to have you here. You don't do a lot of podcasts. You are both prolific writers. I would say you have very eccentric sometimes ideas, but very prescient ideas at the same time. And one of those was a piece that I think, Matti, you may have led that was in 2021, which is the Middleware Thesis. But then again, recently, you've written a post that was called the Dev2Dev market that's related to that. And I would like if you could just kind of explain, your thoughts and what you were conveying with that Dev2Dev piece, because I think it was really interesting.
Yeah, so I'd say that the thesis of Dev2Dev is the fact that everyone is kind of defaulting to selling picks and shovels and hiding behind, sort of like a micro techno bubble, hiding behind buzzwords, not building towards the users. So it's like we have this, Dev2Dev circle jerk that is, trying to sell to each other. But the main question that we're asking is, where are the users? And that's why we kind of, I would say, are skeptical about all these Dev2Dev efforts. I'm not saying that we don't need infrastructure, but I think we need use cases much more. So it's not about how, but it's about what. I'd say that's the main part of it, I would say.
Yeah, is it fair to say, like, back in 2021 when you wrote that article, that you were maybe more, I hate the word bullish, but you were more bullish on the middleware infrastructure level then than you are now? I mean, one of the things you hear a lot about, people talk about now is that we actually need applications people want to use. Is that what you're more looking to invest in because the infrastructure space is just saturated at this point?
Yeah, I would say that, like looking at the deal flow and looking at the activity, I would say infrastructure dominates. And I would say it's kind of a, it's in a way it's hedging, right? Like it's I would say it's easier to go through a techno bubble that few understand, than to actually go try to build a solution that has to speak for itself, right? When I was writing about, I think we did write 2 middleware theses. I think the idea back then was like the infra is really weak, right? That we need those solutions, but now we are sort of like overcompensating, I would say, and there's like too much infra and very little use cases. So that's where I wouldn't say infra bearishness, but I would say it's more of like being bearish on the lack of creativity, rather than infra per se. And infra just became like this purgatory that kind of everyone is defaulting to, and it's probably easy to pitch in the boardrooms and whatnot. The incentive is to kind of prolong your existence, and you can do it very well by talking about the tech that no one gets.
Yeah, 100%. I thought it was really funny how you described B2B. That infrastructure is similar to B2B that we see SaaS and Web 2, and how boomers love that. So boomers are all attracted to the infrastructure play. Fisk, what are your thoughts on the concept?
Nassim Taleb had this saying, or I'm not sure if it was his, but I read it from him. He was saying something like, it's much easier to macro bullshit than to micro bullshit, right? So it's much easier to bullshit people about big macro trends and whatnot than to go to a particular, let's say, business or company and bullshit there, because then the numbers need to be very precise, and it's very easy to see if there is a product, if there is a business there. So I would say the sort of variation to this would be it's much easier to infra bullshit than to consumer bullshit, right? So if you are building some complicated dev-to-dev infrastructure for which you need 2 years of development and a lot of biz dev to onboard some developers that might not even exist today, you can kind of get funding and keep the ball rolling for some time. But if you are building consumer application, you kind of need to really, like, if it's already out, if you are still not in development mode, there is very easy way for you to show that you have traction or not, right? So it's much harder for you to bullshit if you are building for consumers, because after some time you are measuring daily active users, and if there is 20 daily active users after 6 months of your app being out, and no matter how many new buzzwords you invent, you are clearly failing, right? So in this sense, for some desperate projects out there, pivoting to infra or building more infra is kind of a way to keep the ball rolling without actually showing anything substantial, right? So I would say that this is something that's happening now with some of the infra buzzwords that we are seeing, such as account abstraction and intents. I mean, these things are very important, and we backed projects that are building these things since before it was cool, or building infrastructure for this. But we are seeing many more Me Too projects jumping on the wagon right now. And I would also say that it's not infra is definitely important. And during DeFi summer, when everyone was chasing some food coins and farms, we saw that, okay, these things are all the same. And in order to build cooler things, we need better infrastructure. And it was not just now we are bullish infrastructure because nobody else is bullish. We actually saw the need for infrastructure to mature a bit more. But now it's the opposite. There is a lot of teams solving the infrastructure problem, even redundantly. But now we need to prove that blockchains are actually useful for end users in order to earn next stage of blockchain evolution. So that's why we are not saying, suddenly we are not bullish on middleware anymore. I mean, we are still bullish on most of the projects that are building real stuff, and those that we invested in, but we are not bullish on this bandwagoning that's happening right now. We are always trying to look where the ball is going to be, not where it is now. And middleware is where the ball is now, so it's not as interesting anymore for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like a lot of the users in the space right now is like the dev-to-dev market explains is developers. It's not actual users who are using applications. It's a lot easier to build for the users that are in the space, which is developers, instead of the users we hope to have, which are the ones using applications. Fisk, you've been a big fan of I don't know if the app chain thesis is the right way to say it, but just a focus on apps, really, at least since 2020, 2021. And that's one reason you used to talk about, I think, Polkadot caught your eye, because that is something that they were focusing on more or less. And then I think it was in 2021, Zee Prime wrote a piece called The Fappening, which I think is a great name. I'd love for you to talk a bit maybe about that piece, but also just your view on the Fat App thesis, going forward.
I mean, it's... when you look at how Web2 companies are structured when it comes to their value capture or how big they are, most of the biggest companies are kind of touching the end user. I guess maybe some infrastructure services like Amazon Web Service is the exception, but everything else, Facebook or Meta, Google, Apple, they are all touching the end user, right? So it's kind of for everyone who is kind of thinking about where the value will be captured or how the value will be distributed in the tech stack, it's super obvious to see that where users are being captured and when they are spending most of their attention and time, that's the easiest point of value capture for a project. So I would say that it's not super hard to figure it out, right? But when you look at crypto, you kind of feel that crypto stack is a bit different in a sense that there are all these blockchain layer ones that capture a lot of value. There is a lot of complicated middleware that may capture some value. There are a lot of tokens for things that in a Web2 equivalent they wouldn't really have a token. So now like some people may be thinking that, okay, so now we enter the new paradigm where most of the value will be captured on the infrastructure side, and then there will be like one big infrastructure layer, and on top of it will be many more applications or like small projects that will compete for user. But I would say that in a sense it will be similar to what Web2 is proliferating with like new projects. That any new project that want to compete, you cannot just fork Facebook code and like vampire attack Facebook, right? It's much harder than that. You can do it in crypto to an extent, but over time we saw that all these incentives and tokens that kind of were able to capture some users temporarily, it doesn't really work for a long term. For long term, you need to build like sustainable, sticky app. We don't really have like a big super app right now at this point that would really like demonstrate that this thesis is correct. We have a couple of applications that are kind of pointing towards the direction, but I would say that in near future there will be a couple of really big applications that will like break through the mold and really show us the strength of like end user being captured and value being provided for him. We are not there yet, I would say.
It was funny when Fisk was talking about the AWS. So I think I gave this example in the Dev2Dev article where this is how sort of like the Dev2Dev is connected to the Fappening. So Amazon was this like user facing, bookstore, or at the time probably like a store for everything almost. So it was doing commerce. But it had this internal project that was kind of about optimizing infra, right? And so this is how the AWS was built, right? It was for their internal purposes because they knew what they want, right? Like they were not the first selling or having this kind of service, and there were other people selling the service. I think IBM was like probably the first. But it was actually them who realized that, we use it for ourselves, but hey, what if we sell this stuff? So it was the user-facing, consumer-facing application, if you will, that managed to conquer that stack downstream, right? So it's an interesting and provocative example. And, for example, if you look at Steppen, so their token got pretty popular, and it was like, I think it was doing the most volumes on Orca. So what they did is essentially forked Orca and created their own DEX, right? So, if you control the user, why should you give something to some other middleware component if you can, get the fees yourself? So I guess, we probably see this with Uniswap as well, trying to build a wallet, trying to build everything. Everyone is trying to build a super app. Even, we get so many of these like pitches, people saying, oh, we are the super app. And, I always tell them like the first rule of super app is you never call yourself a super app, and you're not building a super app. Like this is nonsense, right? You're building a product wedge from which you can expand into what might become a super app. So yeah, I guess that there is a possibility of once you own the user, that you're in a better position to monetize and to sort of own the stack. I'm not saying that everything has to be necessarily kind of centralized by the app, but I guess there might be that tendency. So now, for example, my question is, when you see, many of the projects in the space being very kind of reactionary, almost thinking that, me just being here and surviving long enough will be enough. So I just have to participate to win. So they're just like very static and just waiting for the bull market to come, like some kind of a random act of God or whatever. And there's no like urge to build towards the user. So I'm thinking, all right, if I'm a DEX, can I just go and can I build a consumer facing product that just leverages DEX as a part of its stack? Like, can I build out of DEX towards the user? Like Steppen did it the other way around, but are there any sort of ideas? Are there any possible attempts, go in that direction? So, yeah, I would say that these are the kind of like the main tenets of the FedApp thesis. So it's more like a hypothesis, right? But we'll see how it plays out. But we do feel like there's a if you capture users, you're really in a good position to monetize downstream.
Yeah, those are really good questions. I know as you talk about the app thesis, one thing you talk about is moats. And like you said, in crypto, you can fork anything. You can easily have, it's like low switching costs. So one of the things you put in the article is that you think any application trying to become a super app or that has a chance of one, something that they'll do is probably become a block builder. And I'm curious if you can explain that a little bit more. And then another moat that you mentioned is that these apps, because everyone has access to all the data, because it's on an open data layer, whether it's Ethereum or something else, you need to add in a new like identifier that's not on the blockchain itself, potentially to create these moats. So maybe Matty or Fisk, if you could just go into how these applications you think will actually establish these moats to become an aggregator in a sense.
Yeah, so on the block builder side of things, I've probably changed my mind since then. I do believe that like building blocks still depends largely on order flow, and where our order flows are originating, it's at the consumer layer. So I think it's going to be very hard to build it sort of bottom up in a sense, like from the sort of from the depth of the mempool. In terms of moats, yeah, that's tough. I guess a good token could be a moat, right? Because it sounds stupid, but I have this like thesis that token is the product, but it's kind of a lengthy one. But if you like just look at Bitcoin, like that is it's a piece of code that anyone can fork, right? Like we know it, but the strength, it's in the legacy and the community, if you will, that it's attached to it, right? So that is not forkable. So and it's the token that becomes the moat then. So I guess it's about building a brand, right? Bitcoin is a brand. Ethereum is a brand, and I strongly believe that each block space is a Veblen good. Like there's a plenty of block space to go around, but people for some reason choose Ethereum. So it's mostly brand, right? That's why I would say that all this modular debate and whatnot, it's probably redundant. It could be that ETH is Nike and Sol is Adidas potentially, right? So it's all about a brand or tribe preference, if you will. So I do think that this brand buy-in could be the moat, right? Like there's nothing fundamental that is better about Coke than about your local hipster Coca-Cola equivalent, but it's just it's not global and people are not buying it. So I guess brand could be the strongest moat that you can deliver, but there's no process, there's no recipe for how to create a brand, right? So I guess there's always a question of switching costs. So people are trading on Uniswap. I don't know, is it the best DEX? People are using MetaMask. Is it the best wallet? It's very hard to switch sometimes. So I guess if you're in a position where you already have users and it's growing, you always can make it hard to for people to switch. So I guess this is potentially where the moat comes as well. And then in terms of execution downstream, like this block building game can provide like better execution and whatnot, then I guess you can also compete on prices. But I guess competing on prices is always difficult, right? It's like this race to the bottom that DEXs are centralized exchanges are facing and DEXs will face too. So it's I guess it's tough. So I lean towards the brand thing, and I do believe that we're more in commerce than we realize. So I believe that tokens are potentially a commercial product that people are buying, and so I guess that is one hypothesis I would say.
Yeah, I think brand's super important. And Fisk, I'm curious to see what you think on this too. I don't know if this is you, Fisk, or just like in some of the writings I've read it. I think at the time it sounded like, and this is a debate, is Blockspace commoditizable? Which I think at this point, like the answer has kind of been shown as no, which is tied to brand. For example, like I think rollups like Eclipse, which is an SVM general purpose L2, is going to Ethereum is where it's going to settle. And that's because that's where the price insensitive users are, and also where a lot of interesting state and tokens are. So in that sense, it's like it's not commoditizable. And the other thing with app chains is that's still a thesis. DYDX, I think they're about to launch. They haven't launched on their Cosmos app chain already. But I think there is a little bit of a narrative shift in that maybe we do not need 10,000 app chains. Maybe and this is Eclipse, they're thinking that, oh, we tried to do this. We tried to offer rollups as a service, but really like there's probably going to be a power law outcome where there are benefits of composability and also economic improvements from being on the same chain. So Fisk, I'm curious how you think about this.
Yeah, well, with regards to app chain thesis, I think that my opinion is kind of still the same, or unchanged since last time I spoke about it years ago, because we are still so early. We who are in crypto, we think that because we are in crypto for 4, 5, 6, 7 years, we have seen so much development and so much adoption. So now over the lifespan, we already seen how this technology is maturing, and now we have, I think that many of us have this feeling that now it's already some sort of developed stage of blockchains, and now what we see now is the final stage or close to the final stage. I would say that this is an illusion. Crypto still has thousands of users, maybe tens of thousands. Of course, there are many people holding crypto somewhere on Binance or Coinbase, but there are not really that many users actually doing stuff on chain, like individual people. There is a lot of capital controlled by a couple of people, but there is not enough end users to actually prove or disprove any of these theses we are discussing for a couple of years. So I would say that what we see now is still insignificant. I think that the important point will be when crypto starts, or blockchains and the block space starts serving I don't know, 100 million users or 200 or 1 billion users. At that point, I think it will be very easy to say which architecture or blockchain structure or which blockchain thesis is correct and which was disproven. But at this point, I think the jury is still out. It's true that now upchain thesis of Polkadot and Cosmos is kind of being replaced by rollups or rollup thesis or rollup chains or rollups as a service or whatever. It's still the same thing. The architecture, the structure is almost the same. It just now we call it rollups, and it's on Ethereum, so ETH maxis are more comfortable to entertain this thesis as well, right? So I would say the jury is still out. I definitely agree that, it doesn't make sense for me to have, or I don't see a future where we have some people say tens of thousands or thousands of roll-ups, and every little bullshit will have its own roll-up. Even if it is super easy to spin a new roll-up technically, I think these other friction and the switching cost for users and the cost of infrastructure that needs to come together to enable smooth bridging and everything else, it will just be too high to justify. So I agree with you that it probably will be some sort of a power law. I don't necessarily think it will be a power law of 3 huge winners and then long tail. I think it can be a bit more distributed, but I don't think it will be thousands or tens of thousands. With regards to DYDX, well, you asked about moats. I would say one of the biggest moats that a project can have is to own not only the end user, but also the underlying layer one, the block producing layer, which would be an app chain, right? And if you own the let's say the front end or the end user, and then you own the blockchain infrastructure, of course you can use all kinds of middleware enablers in the middle, but you own, I think, the 2 biggest, most critical pieces where the value can be captured, and then your life is super easy if you can do that. Of course, you will restrict your composability, but there are many projects which actually don't mind restricting the composability, I don't know, even from gaming or even derivatives like DYDX. And I would also say that some of them can even benefit from a bit less composability, because unlimited composability creates I would say almost unlimited attack surface, and the benefits of unlimited composability are not as high as potential risks if there are many different things that can go wrong with stuff that someone will permissionlessly build on top of you. So I would say that it's still plausible that we will see a future where many things are kind of siloed. And we can also see it in within Ethereum DeFi ecosystem, where everybody was, during DeFi summer, everybody was hailing DeFi Legos, how everything will come together, everybody will build a little piece, and then they will be connected in this very nice Lego castle, and everything will be amazing together. And now we are seeing that most of the surviving DeFi projects are kind of, instead of just being happy Lego pieces connected together, they are trying to compete with each other by integrating vertically or horizontally, building additional services themselves, even though this already exists, like I don't know, like Uniswap is trying to do wallet and NFT trading. Good example of this is Frax, where they are trying to do LSDs and stable coins and everything themselves. Curve and Aave as well, like exchange and a lending protocol now building their own stable coins, trying to compete with Maker in stablecoin space. Maker forking Aave protocol, to what was the name of the protocol that they are
new chain.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. But anyway, everybody is trying to do everything at this point because they realize that, they are not actually building Lego pieces. They are building their own little empires, and they want to expand their borders as fast as possible before they are saturated, right? So yeah, I guess jury is still out. The only exception, or there are a couple, but the biggest exception to this thesis is still Solana with its monolithic structure. But even there, like, they will need to work really hard to maintain the performance of the chain if there are so many different things being built on it that will compete for block space. And of course, they have parallelization and other tools to kind of deal with that. But I would say that there is this thing called Jevons paradox. Feel free to Google it. I'm not good at explaining it very well, but it basically says something like the more you enable like new activity with scaling the infrastructure, the activity will scale with it and will like always capture the free space that you enabled or created. Right?
Yeah, gains in efficiency lead to increased consumption, basically.
Thank you, academic Matti.
Yeah, it's funny because I wrote this. I actually Fisk inspired me to write one thing that I never published, and I probably never even like got him to read it. Actually, is on Blockspace at large, and Jevons Products was part of it. But I think that when Fisk said that the jury is still out there, I very much agree with that. I'm not sure about app chains, but I don't think we have like really found a product market fit for Blockspace, because Blockspace is ultimately the product, right? That blockchains are selling, and I really believe that at the moment, Blockspace is very much I said a Veblen good, so it's a luxury, and because like who has so much money to spend on transaction on ETH, right? Like it's even in a day when it's not really spiking, it's still pretty expensive. Anyways, there were inventions that started out as luxury and became like a really like a, I would say, social scalability differentiators, like mechanical clock, right? Like it started as a like very luxurious thing in the 14th century, where it was very expensive to produce and maintain. And it took the pendulum clock a couple of centuries later to kind of like have this timekeeping in a more scalable way. The same for automobile, right? It was very like luxurious product. Electricity, the same thing, right? So it wasn't thought of as a scalable thing that could become like game changer for society. And I do feel like Blockspace is still at that space at that point where it's like we don't really see the product market fit fully. We are running cool experiments, but yeah, I guess imagine that there's an app that leverages Blockspace that has suddenly goes to like 10 million daily active users. I don't know, like if stablecoins have that, probably not, right? Like in proper real user count, right? Like probably not. So if there's a application that achieves it, it's probably dwarfing everything that has happened so far in the space. So is it going to be pocketed parachain? I don't know. Like I don't see many new projects being built there, but it's definitely not going to be Cosmos. I'm joking. At that point, the that application can choose, right, whether they will go with an app chain and whatnot. Like for example, on Near, like there's not many people discussing Near, but we talked to a couple of teams that, for example, have chosen Near purely for the technological reasons. Like they're not like part of the community or anything like that. They're just leveraging its tech essentially. I'm not saying whether they're good or bad, but there is activity. It's a little bit different to what is being built on ETH. Maybe more similar to Solana, but yeah. So the point is, if there's an app that can like go from 0 to 10 million in a couple of months, then I guess things can change rapidly. I don't see anything like that surfacing, but it's usually slowly and then suddenly.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and those are really good points. Like, we haven't really found product market fit. I do think we had Antonio from DYDX on, which is one of the few products in crypto that you could maybe has a semblance of product market fit. They have about 50% of on-chain derivatives. But even Antonio is like, we really don't have PMF. That's why we're willing to go for an app chain and like take this big risk. But what is interesting, Fisk, is you talked about there's like almost a gravity for these DeFi applications to horizontally integrate and add new functions. DYDX is actually doing the opposite. I know Antonio talked about he used to think that they had to offer everything that an exchange did, but he's like, actually, we need to be really good at one thing right now, which is perpetuals. And so he's actually drawn that back, and that's what they're going to focus on. So it'll be interesting. It seems like a lot of products are doing that, a lot of projects, because they just haven't found users in one thing. So they're like, okay, what else can we build? Maybe we'll find users there. And maybe the last thing I'd say about like the app chain, the long tail of app chains, I'm trying to start this meme that it's like the long tail of app chains is pretty much just a database with a Web3 marketing budget. I think one last point I'd like to touch on this like app chain infrastructure piece before we move on is just what you think about Uniswap's recent announcement that Uniswap Labs in the front end is going to start charging 15 basis points on swaps. And some people are a little upset about this because you have Uniswap Labs, which built the Uniswap protocol, but they kind of like spun off, and now they're in control of the front end, which any front end can interact with the Uniswap backend. And then they also have the Uniswap wallet. So that's really controlled by Labs, not the foundation, because there's been this big debate, like, do we turn on a fee switch? Like, do token holders vote to turn on a fee switch at the protocol level? But this is actually a fee switch at the front end level. So none of that revenue goes to the token itself. I'm curious, like, what you think about that move. And is this like a tension we're going to see pop up in crypto where you have the protocol underneath and then the front end built by the team that's kind of spun out, and now they're almost in competition with each other?
I don't actually see it as such a big conflict as many other people see it. I would say that, I mean, maybe it's because, like, a bit cynically, I don't even see Uniswap as some decentralized protocol controlled by users or token holders or whatever. I think that's kind of, I mean, they don't even, I don't even think that they want to portray it this way anymore, maybe on the surface, but like nobody is really kidding themselves that Uniswap is super decentralized. So I would just say that this is like I see it as just another internal decision of a centralized business and maybe an experiment, which is interesting. And I think it's much less impactful that people think. Like, people are cutting much more slack to other projects that are doing much worse stuff, charging for all kinds of bullshit. And Uniswap actually provided a lot of value to the whole ecosystem, and like it's one of the most important projects. And I would say it's fine that they are trying to charge some money for something new, and let's see how market reacts. I'm all about experimenting rather than talking and doing some what ifs. I don't hold any Uni tokens. I don't feel, even if I was holding them, I don't feel entitled to that revenue. I mean, it is what it is. Everybody who holds Uni token in 2023 needs to know that this is not like a fee sharing or revenue sharing asset, right? At this point, and won't be in foreseeable future. So I don't know why everybody is so upset and mad and surprised or whatever. Especially given the fact that there are aggregators that are probably making orders of magnitude more money on fees and like slippages and all kinds of stuff connecting to Uniswap than Uniswap will make on charging for its official front end, right? I don't know. Like, I just feel it's overblown, and it's a little experiment with another way to capture value. Let's see how it goes.
But it shows like the first principle conflict of, having two different sets of stakeholders, right? Like equity and token, right? Like that could be a pretty dangerous game there.
Yeah, but there are many more projects that have this problem. Yeah, it's actually
Exactly.
true that we see it in practice here, and it's interesting. But yeah, this is something that actually can set some precedent for other projects in the future if it's successful. Or so that's why maybe it's interesting to see. But I mean, token was given out for free. This was not a token that was sold to investors via some ICO or some sale, right? So in this case, you got to airdrop some token, you could buy it on open market, but nobody promised you revenues. It would be a bit different if they really had like a token round where they would sell tokens aside from equity to some group of investors. I think that would be a bit different, but I don't see a huge problem with this. Although, yeah, principally it is a problem. If you have token and equity and all kinds of foundations and other entities around, like, how do you divide the pie? How do you cut it where do you capture the value? It's interesting to see.
Yeah, I guess you don't see many teams working on like, accruing or baking more value into the token, right? It's not a very popular thing to do, especially not if you're in the US. So, but yeah, maybe more people should try that rather than kind of retreating. But yeah, it's easy to say then.
I guess one other thing is that Uniswap is such a clear market leader at this point in its category that they can afford to try these random things, how to capture value. Like many other projects are in like a uphill battle sort of stage where they fight for market share or they try to define and capture new markets, and they cannot really like think that hard about additional ways to capture value, right? So Uniswap is in a bit of a pole position that they have some leeway to try it now, even though I'm not sure if the timing in like depths of bear market is the best for it. But maybe yes, maybe because there are not many people now that would complain apart from some hardcore community loudmouths. Maybe it's cheaper to experiment now than in bull market where every mistake can be much more costly. I don't know. I would just leave it to them and just watch them try stuff in the arena.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't know about the timing either. I do think it's interesting just as an experiment. Like you said, they're the market leader in the space, and you can see how this actually affects the transaction flow. And the cool thing about crypto is we can actually watch this and like see it live, and we can see how much money is getting shifted around if it impacts anybody. Let's shift over to social because Matty, I know you've written quite a bit about this. Fisk, I know you also tweet about like friend tech. Matty, you talked about how when you started diving into social and how crypto can play a role, you discovered basically more and more how social is becoming asocial media. So I'm curious if you can explain that concept, and then also, but like from there, so how does crypto play a role in this like a social media future?
Yeah, I guess the social media is kind of a complex thing, but it's essentially about like the human element kind of evaporating more and more, and people doing things to optimize for the outcomes rather than just doing things that they want to. Whereas, I mean, Fisk was arguing that like Twitter in its early days was much more boring than it is today, and fair point. That's true, right? So it's like we're optimizing for the spectacle, and that it's kind of a asocial element, or maybe parasocial at best. And how crypto plays into it, it's maybe a bit dystopian thesis, but I guess that the hyper monetization or hyper financialization could be doubling down of this like live streaming of mass delusion, where GDP and inflation and token going up or down is the main spectacle, right? A 24/7 casino where you gamble on the outcome of things. The same way everyone could become like a media channel, and everyone could, like in crypto, everyone could become a stakeholder of a given product or an idea. So the thrill of watching numbers go up and down like becomes the product, right? Like that's the new addiction. So tokenization is potentially a path of least resistance for more dopamine extraction. So yeah, and then in a way the numbers in the digital world could become more important than the physical goods that they represent. So it's much cheaper to produce dopamine in the world of bits. And I guess speculation is one way to get there, but I mean, I do hope that we can go beyond that, and it's not going to only sort of remain in that gambling phase where we can potentially go to things like tokenizing culture, tokenizing brands, that type of thing. I mean, it's very abstract, and I'm yet to see a sort of viable commercial success, or like a hint of success or something where you'd be like, all right, like like this really makes sense, as in like without tokens we wouldn't be able to get this experience. Like tokens actually are great UX for this, right? Because like tokens are friction, that's what people say in terms of like products, right? But what if we can have a product where tokens facilitating better UX? Yeah, I guess this is where the ideation needs to take place, and this is where the next big thing is coming from. My opinion is one of these like idiosyncratic attempts. People are talking about transition from user generated content to user generated products. right? I think like Multicoin put out that thesis. It's very interesting. And I think that, for example, these days, like we see something similar happening in DeSci, decentralized science. So like VitaDAO and HeriDAO are sort of like, goal aligned communities that are like fueled by tokens, and the goal is this edgy scientific discovery, and it's very much social, right? So there's a product, right? A real product. There's a community. There's a common goal. So and there's a brand element to it. So I guess this could be like the first instance of social slash commerce. I mean, it's very early, so it's very hard to say, but at least they're trying something new and trying to find sort of new utility for tokens.
Yeah, I think the future of social is really interesting. I think, Fisk, I don't know if you said this, but I'd like to hear your comments on it. It's like, the interesting thing with FinTech is you buy shares into, say, like an influencer's profile, and then you get access to a group chat, but there's no on-chain enforcement for that influencer or person to actually participate in there. And it's like, that's almost shown that status is more valuable than utility in some ways with social and crypto in general. And how I think about it as well is like, if you think about like RWAs, the future of that, and there's people talking about like, okay, well, you can't actually enforce all this on chain. And maybe that's not a problem. So I'm just curious how you think about this, like FinTech status versus utility concept.
I mean, it's a loaded question, but in general, SocialFi or whatever, Web3 social, we were always excited about this like kind of infra layer stuff with like ZK identities and owning your social graph, all these things that are kind of cool for nerds. But it turns out that people actually care about like financialization more or speculation in social context. So I would say right now I would like to see something like I'm in a group with someone and I'm able to trustlessly bet against the other person about some like defined outcome on some sport or some election result or something like that. Or I can follow someone's trades automatically and trading following is not very interesting to me, but if there is an influencer that's doing a lot of like analysis and trading and stuff, like I should be able to at least on chain following their recommendation and actions. I should be able to do it more easily within the app. Maybe I should be able to send money to someone very easily within the app, right? Like tip someone or pay them for something, and it's not possible in current SocialFi Meta or FinTech or anything. So there are so many things that you could improve. Even the simple like customization of the price of your paid group or like or this like FinTech group, or the way how the curve is designed, so you can actually make it more exclusive to only a couple of people, and then it gets prohibitively expensive. Or you want to have like a big group with many fans when the price is more stable and it's not prohibitive even when you have 200 members. All these things, like everybody can imagine them, but I would say that now everybody is so focused on just farming points, and then there are some other competitors trying different things, then the experience is really diluted. At the same time, like I think it's still super early. Like everything that is being tested in crypto is tested on the same group of lab rats, which are all these crypto degens and crypto natives. And I would say, like, I don't know how to put it. It's a stupid analogy, I guess, but when you have a scientific laboratory with a lot of rats, and you are using the same rats for every experiment, I would say these rats are no longer giving you the same results as you would get if you always use the new batch of rats that are fresh and that are not like ridden by all kinds of previous chemicals that you used on them. So I think it's kind of similar with crypto users and testing all the products that we are building on the same target group of users, which are like crypto Twitter, right? Like everybody is already so spoiled by airdrops and so shaken by the market and like so used to bad UX in many cases that even when you want to like test some new product, you kind of need to, that the first group of people you will attract will usually be the crypto natives, and they have their specific way of thinking already, and they have their own like biases, and they want to make money on airdrops. So you are trying to appease them instead of actually building cool product for another 10 million users, which I don't know how to solve this problem, but I think it's a big problem that every crypto app, even the more ambitious ones that eventually want to scale to tens of millions of users, they always start with this first starting pack of testing users, which are airdrop hunting crypto Twitter degens. I'd say that we need to break this mold as well in order to move somewhere else and not be stuck in this circle jerk loop we are in now in crypto.
I just want to go back to what Garrett asks about, asked about status and utility, right? He said status or utility, but I think that's a wrong framing. It's a false dichotomy. I think status is utility, right? Like status is access, even in like a physical world, right? Like in a, so I, like people talk about token gated, but I think more token enabled. That's in my opinion a better framing. And you look at these like frantic shares and whatnot and social tokens and people talk about real world assets. That's a real pet peeve of mine. But what makes assets real? It's in terms of finance, the only fundamental thing is the flow of money, because people are willing to spend money on a sugar water that is probably mostly net negative to their health. The stock and the value of the company selling it is real, right? So I do feel like we can the same way people are buying a gimmick product, they could buy someone else's shares and whatnot, and whatever utility is attached to it, that remains to be seen. But it's, like many of the consumer products are just basically a product of an illusion, right? Like they're only selling expectation of something, or of looking like something, or feeling like something, or looking like someone, right? That's potentially there. So the same things could happen with tokens and social tokens, where you're essentially selling just a feeling of something, an access, if you will. Fundamentally, it doesn't have to be that different to the physical goods that we're buying that fundamentally do nothing, right? So
yeah, I love that point. I agree. It's not an or, it's an and. It's like, especially as you get older, I think you realize that almost everything you do in life or buy or participate in has status attached to it. It's even like if you're running a marathon, you might be doing it for your health, but there's also a huge status component, and also community, right? Like a lot of people do it just to meet friends. And I think that also is going to apply to crypto. And Fisk, I loved, we don't need the next billion users in crypto. We need new rats. So it's a good framing, but I love that analogy. I have one last question that I think both of you more or less disagreed on this concept, but Matty, I found it really interesting, and it's something that I relate to and also see happening. And you describe it as, with crypto, there's this maybe false narrative in that equal opportunity or increased access to opportunity can actually lead to a greater disparity in outcomes, not more equal outcomes. And I'd like for you to maybe talk about that thesis and how it's related to, the internet with leverage and networks, and there's a power law that comes through with it. And then Fisk, I'd love to see if how you feel about that as well.
Oh, it's a tough one, a sensitive one as well. Yeah, I think like there's not that much to be said about that one. It's just I think internet is a leverage, because everything that you do, it's kind of comes with like this sort of huge 10x, 100x effect for you. So it's very easy to always get stuck on that next dopamine shot that's coming from the screen. But you can also sort of like take control and do productive stuff on the internet, like learn, right? Like get into crypto and then make it to become a millionaire and then lose it everything in the bear market. But I guess everything comes with like bigger consequences online. So it gives everyone the same opportunity, but not everyone is making the same choice, right? So it's not that someone else is better or not, but it could be luck, could be many different things. But I just feel like it can really take you under, or it can really enable you to flourish. So and everyone has the same opportunity to click on the same resource, right? To educate themselves about something, or to build something, or be creative in a positive way. Or they can do the other thing, right? Just fall down the false rabbit hole, let's say, and just spend your life, digging into places where there's never anything positive coming out of it. So I guess in that sense, it's not really an equalization machine, but it just creates bigger differences between people because even small actions can have great and vast consequences real fast. So yeah, in that sense, in my opinion, it's it's not about more quality, but probably the other thing. But at the end of the day, it's very hard to secure equality of outcome, and I don't know if that's desirable, right? I guess it really depends on where you're coming from, but in my opinion, everyone should have the same opportunity, but we cannot guarantee the same outcome for everyone.
Yeah, I just have to throw in there, Fisk, real quick, is that I feel like that side of it shouldn't be controversial. It's like there's definitely going to be different outcomes just because the effort you put into it or how lucky someone got or like the skills that they were born with or worked for. But the real like gist of it and what crypto can hopefully solve is equal access to opportunity, which we know doesn't exist today. And I think that's something we're all striving for. But I think the concept of just because you have, equal access to opportunity is not equivalent to equal access and outcome. And I read this statement yesterday, which is a little bit of a hyperbole, but it's saying like, your job's not going to be taken away by AI. Your job's going to be taken away by the person next to you who's now 10 times more productive because of AI. So it's just like who can leverage the tools the best. But yeah, Fisk, I would love to hear your take.
Yeah, I mean, in this regard, crypto is not different than internet or maybe AI or any other like technology that appeared and enabled some new things, right? Like, of course, it will create new billionaires and already did very fast. And kind of these people are like, they hit the escape velocity and will be very hard for others to catch them. So in a sense, this like material inequality is present, but this was happening with internet as well. I would say in one way, at least crypto is kind of greater equalizer than other technologies, is that even with the Web2 or internet, you still need to have a bank account to hold your money that you made somehow. You still had to like hold your money in some stable unit of value or something like that, or some investment, or you at least like, or at best you could be in Silicon Valley and like build new startups there in order to get capital and to be able to create a business that is actually like meaningful and can scale, right? So I think crypto kind of makes, or at least in the recent past, it made it much easier. Capital formation was much easier. Holding value, like in stable coins or whatever, was much easier, even for someone who never could have a bank account in a Western world where the money are reasonably safe for this person to not be worried about it. So in this sense, crypto helped a lot. Like I can be 14-year-old Pakistani kid and I can be hacking smart contracts and stuff, and I don't have any other prerequisite. I don't have to travel to Silicon Valley. I mean, it obviously still helps, but I don't have to do it. In the past, no matter how smart I was, I couldn't just like do anything from my Pakistani village and like capture the money that I somehow made and like hold on to them, right? So that's one thing. And
I think you should have just said that the like crypto is a greater equalizer than Web2 because it's at the end is making everyone equally poor.
Well, I guess, yeah, and that was my last point actually. Like many people who make money super fast in crypto actually also like, especially if they become the main character, they lose them as well. So there is much less of a chance to like sustainably capture the value there because the market moves so fast. If you are not talking about some sort of regulatory mode that you are aiming for or something like that, it's still much easier to disrupt you as a crypto project than it is as a Web2 or some other type of business. So at least in this regard, it's much easier to fork, even though we saw that forking and vampire attacking and all these things, they are not really as successful as people anticipated, but it's still much more possible than how can you vampire attack Facebook, right? You cannot, but you can vampire attack many on fork and were part like many of the crypto projects. And I said in the recent past, because I would say that as we approach maturity, like many crypto projects will try to build regulatory moats and other moats around them to prevent that. Maybe even closed source their code base. We see many projects building in closed source instead of open source. So it will be a mixed bag. But at least until recently, crypto was, I think, more equalizing, and it allowed a lot of mobility between like let's say income brackets, or at least like the net asset value brackets, but it moved in both directions and it was very fast. It was not just like I just capture the wealth once and now just create this one regulatory mode and it's mine forever. I still need to like fight for it, or withdraw money and buy some expensive real estate somewhere, but then I'm not in the game anymore and someone else is building something better than me anyway. So yeah, but I think this is like very philosophical debate, and no matter what kind of conclusion we reach, it will be imperfect, and it doesn't, no matter what we believe, reality of technological innovation and digital disruption moves on its own way.
100% agree. Okay. I kind of lied. One quick question. You can just kind of do a rapid fire before we close out. One of the things I really like about you and Zee Prime is you're willing to take very bold bets. And some of those seem wild, like, HairDAO or Fisk. You used to talk about Olympus DAO a lot and why you found that interesting. And like some people would look at that, and if that's the only tweet they saw of you, they'd be like, I'm not going to follow this guy anymore. Like he was completely wrong, right? But then you have other takes that are extremely prescient that are extremely right. And it's like, as an investor or just, in any field in the space, you have to take those bold bets. And if you don't, you can be right 90% of the time, but like the outcome doesn't matter, right? Like expected value is probability times outcome. And like a lot of people just try to get that probability to be 99%, but they don't care about the outcome. And I think you guys focus on the outcome and like what's around the corner. And I think people need to, I'm going to suggest people to follow you and like read all the pieces on Zee Prime, because it's really well written. Because like when you read somebody's book or their articles, if you agree with everything they say and you don't think anything's kind of, bold, out there, crazy prediction, then there's no point in reading it because you're not learning anything new. And Mattie and Fisk, I can promise that if you read their articles, you will learn something new. You don't have to agree with all of it, but I think that's one reason why they're such a great follow. So just to close that off, maybe Mattie, Fisk, what is something that you think people should be paying attention to right now, or maybe learning about in the space? That could be a sector. It could be, if you want to say DeFi, NFTs, whatever it might be. Like, what is interesting you that, maybe other people can read about and get through during this bear market?
I'm actually thinking, well, there is like so many things that I feel like it's too obvious to say. Then it really matters just like what kind of things you are into as a person. What do you understand? Like if you are a competitive esports gamer, obviously gaming will be for you and not some new option protocol, right? But I think it's more individual than just like even me. Like I suddenly realized that on many Zee Prime calls with founders or projects that are pitching to us, sometimes it's just like not something that I understand, and I'm just like patiently waiting for other team members to ask the right questions because I know that they understand it much better. So yeah, like crypto is too big to pay attention to everything, and it's much better to find your niche. But if it's something that escapes all kinds of brackets or like categories and it's intriguing enough, I think that's definitely worth paying attention to. I'm not sure if I can say it, but like there are many. I would say like anything that kind of brings together passionate group of people who are not dominantly crypto natives, but they have a problem that financialization thanks to crypto can help solve. Like good example is the HairDAO thing, where you have these people that are balding and they really care about it, and they don't see any solutions coming from mainstream pharma and medical research, and they suddenly realize, oh, we can actually form a community around this token, around this tokenized IP that we can gather and harness value from, and we can actually be the ones like propelling it. Like passionate community that cares about something else than just making money or farming yield, and the passionate community that would benefit from the tools or or opportunities that crypto, with its capital formation, with its tokenization, can help with. Anything like that. And yeah, I guess it's actually much harder than it sounds. Like finding a really community that's really passionate about something else than making money in crypto is very hard. Even most of the diehard crypto communities today that you can see, and you would be like, oh, these people are really fanatical about this project. When you really dig deeper into it, you realize that these people are actually not as fanatical about this particular project as they are fanatical about making it and making 100x with their back, and they just for one reason or another have bias towards this back against any other back. But that's very different than being actually passionate about the thing, and the token pumping or whatever is just some sort of side effect of that.
Yeah, no, Fisk, I think it's a great answer. I haven't talked about this in a while, but I think when you're looking for an opportunity in a community that you're talking about, like an example it's pretty good is CrossFit, right? Like that community just absolutely blew up. But for most people, they tried it and they kind of gave up. And I think about this in crypto some ways. Like you have to be really into crypto and into the tech and being a degen. And that's kind of like what CrossFit was. And if I was smart enough, or if anybody else would have seen that, and they're like, okay, this is working with CrossFit. How do we make this like a little bit more accessible, maybe not as extreme? And you saw things like Orange Theory pop up, a lot of like F45, different workout classes. And it really became, they kind of took away some of the like, hey, you got to climb this rope and then, throw this barbell over your head 20 times. But they saw that like community is like really passionate and you can probably expand that out. So I think that plays off what you're saying, Fix. So really like the answer. Matty, you got anything for us?
Well, people could complain and potentially sometimes they think that our articles could be too abstract, but I feel like I'm not in the business of giving advice, and I actually don't want to give advice to people and advice and prescriptions, because I think it will eventually just lead them astray. So what we try to do is provide an idea that people could modify, play with it, make it their own, build up on top of it. So, I mean, I don't have any advice aside of maybe don't seek advice, don't seek prescription, like find your own way in this. And I guess that's the only good thing that I can think of.
Yeah, don't take advice is good advice, probably. But yeah, I agree. Just reading the articles is not that you have to like take it one for one. It's like what ideas does that spark in your mind? So anyways, Matty, Fisk, thanks so much for joining us. Like this, to me, has been one of my favorite podcasts. Really enjoy Zee Prime. For anyone that doesn't know them, definitely recommend following on Twitter. I'll put links in the show notes. But more than anything, go back and read some of their articles. They're really fascinating and pretty forward-looking. So guys, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garrett. Have a good one.
Sweet. We'll see you next time.